Hello and welcome to another monthly reading wrap up and TBR video, episode 169 of the Book Binge. This time around, in case the timing doesn't tell you anything, I'm covering my July reading wrap up and will be, of course, discussing my book of the month for the month and my August reading schedule, everything that I plan to get done over the coming month. Well, July was a shockingly fantastic reading month for me, both in terms of quality and especially in terms of quantity. For once, I planned a whole lot and nearly did it all. And I also got even more read that I didn't even have planned in the first place. Of course, this was due in no small part to audiobooks, but I did quite a bit physically on top of that as well, or at least a not insignificant amount, in my opinion. No reason to delay anymore. Let's go ahead and talk about the reading. Starting off with last month's reads, let me just get this out of the way. Very first thing, right at the beginning of this, Infinite Jest. I read through chapter 27, all like 190 pages plus 30 pages of endnotes of it. So pretty lengthy chapter. I'm coming up on the end. I'm very nearly at the end. We'll talk a little bit more about this a little bit later in one of the next sections, but I really enjoyed chapter 27. It was pretty great. In case you missed last Thursday's video, it was the fourth reading diary for the book, in which case I talk about all of that chapter in specifics. But yeah, that is one of the main things that I got done over the course of this month. The next main thing that I'm excited to talk about that I read from July was a new release. This book actually came out on July 2nd. That is The Failures by Benjamin Lyer, first book in the Wonderlands. A fantastic debut so far. But you'll notice I said started reading because I'm only a little bit under halfway through. I've read parts 1 and 2 out of 4 parts so far. These first 2 parts have been fantastic. If world building is your thing personally as a reader, I highly recommend The Failures solely for that aspect. I've enjoyed everything about it personally, but the world building most especially is like the best part, one of my favorite sets of world building I've ever read in anything ever, and everything else is just working perfectly to my personal tastes anyway, so it is one that even only halfway through I personally highly recommend. I hope it doesn't go off the rails at any point. I've been told that things really pick up in part 3 and I'm excited to continue it. But let's talk about all of the books that I didn't just start or continue in July. Let's talk about everything I read because, well, there's a lot of it, so let's just jump right into it. Over the first week of the month, over 4th of July weekend, I read The Blood of Olympus by Rick Riordan, 5th book in the Heroes of Olympus, finally finishing off this reread. It's a great book. I enjoyed it quite a bit. I wasn't sure. Basically, thinking about the series in memory, I always kind of told people that Mark of Athena and House of Hades were kind of tied as my favorite books in the series, but there's a little bit of me that wondered if Blood of Olympus was, because I couldn't quite remember. And whenever I would think about it, I would think about Blood of Olympus as like, I don't know, is that just the nostalgia of starting to read it on actually the day before release day, I believe, because I got the book pre-ordered from doing library related activities. They ordered the book for me personally. That's still the very, very first day one copy that I have owned. I was like, is it nostalgia? And it turns out that it might not have been nostalgia, and I was just kind of lying to myself and inadvertently to other people as well, because I really like it. It's my favorite book of the series now. I just have a thing for conclusions, and that book was pretty great. It also has me pretty excited to continue with more Riordan. Not this year because I'm not going to have time, but definitely next year I'm going to make the time to read the next series, maybe even 2 series, depending on how things go. Besides The Blood of Olympus, I also read New Spring physically, the prequel of The Wheel of Time. Great book, honestly. I think this thing is disparaged a lot more than it deserves to be. I think it's a great book. The thing that people complain about that book all of the time being the dress shopping chapter was not an issue at all. It was actually plot related and also like far from the worst thing that I've read even in the series so far, and I've only read through the first 5 main books so far. Like, New Spring was just fantastic. I don't really have anything else to say that I haven't said about it already in the 2 reading diaries for it, but if you haven't read the book, of course you're not going to watch those. I will have a review for that coming out, I believe, this month actually, so that will, that'll cover that topic pretty well in my opinion. Next up is a whole long, big old train of Cormac McCarthy stuff. So Yeah, brace yourselves. This isn't going to be just a hate fest, though, because I actually really enjoyed some of what we're going to talk about here. Most especially The Passenger and Stella Maris. And the reason I bring these up together is because not only do they have similar covers for obvious reasons, they're kind of a duology. Not only are they companion novels to each other, they really expand everything about each other in ways that is just perfect. I loved these books a ton. Not only were they my first 5-star McCarthy ratings, they are, in my opinion, McCarthy's magnum opus. Above anything else he has written at all, pretty handily. Just quite frankly, I think they are great. I'm still working right now at the time of recording on writing my Goodreads reviews for those. But I think that when I get around to actually reviewing these on the channel, I might even just not do a normal review method that I normally do, like just doing the good, bad, ugly, spoiler-free stuff. I might just read the reviews that I'm writing for Goodreads for these, because I'm so proud so far of what I've written for those, and it's pretty lengthy, and I don't think I'm going to have any way of conveying what I feel for these books without just reading those reviews. That is how intensely I enjoyed this duology. It was great. Everything else, a little bit more hit and miss, kind of swinging and missing in a couple places, but also hitting solidly enough in other places. Next up was Sutri by Cormac McCarthy. This is his longest novel, pretty handily, and not necessarily in the best ways. It's a little bit more slice of life focused. It's a little bit unfocused in terms of plotting, because like I said, slice of life is a little bit more of what McCarthy's going for with this one, and I think it was okay. There are plenty of moments that are pretty great, really memorable, really fun. There are some moments that are actually quite amusing and almost hilarious, but there's also a lot of stuff that just is kind of pointless and meandering and mediocre. I think this one could have done with a lot more editing and having a little bit more like actual drive and focus to it, even with the slice of life being more of what the point is. So I enjoyed it overall, but nothing that I'm going to write home about, and pretty much like that is the middle of the road for McCarthy in my mind. It's neither great nor bad. It just kind of sits right in the middle of his stuff. There's plenty of stuff that I think is notably worse and plenty of stuff that I think is notably better. So that is how I feel about that. Otherwise, I finished off the McCarthy journey with a few rereads, which we'll get to in just a second, and also the last book that I hadn't read by McCarthy yet, Blood Meridian, what most people consider to be his magnum opus. And just to get it out of the way, I did not like this book at all. I have a 1,500 word review on Goodreads if you want to check out why I didn't really like it, but it really just comes down to it being a little bit repetitive for me. I don't love the way it's written. In fact, a lot of people were like, yeah, McCarthy kind of is hit or miss with his prose, but Blood Meridian is great, and I don't really agree on that. I thought that the plotting, if you could consider it that, was boring and kind of repetitive in a similar way. The fact that McCarthy says they rode on or they moved on probably 50,000 times per chapter really started to grate on me. And the other main thing that most people praise the book for so highly, being Judge Holden the villain, I just did not find very compelling, unfortunately. I know a lot of people love Judge Holden. I just don't really like the judge very much. I don't find him compelling or very interesting, and because I didn't find him very interesting probably is a big part of why the rest of the book did nothing for me overall. But instead of Blood Meridian kind of wrapping up my time with McCarthy, I actually right before that did a couple of rereads for the Sunset Limited, the 2-hour-long play just between two characters. Basically just dialogue, kind of similar to the way that Stella Maris is. I did a reread of this, and even though I thought that I would end up rating this 5 stars upon the reread, I ended up keeping it at 4 stars and actually wrote a little bit extra onto my Goodreads review explaining why. I still think it's great, but I don't love the I don't love the end goal of it, what basically McCarthy was doing with the one character. I appreciated a little bit of the emotional response of Black, but I wasn't super into the way that it ends for White, and so that just kind of influenced my taste of it. I thought, like I said, that it would end up being 5 stars, but there's just something missing in there with the ending that doesn't work for me, so I kept it at 4 stars, but I still really like it. I think it's probably the easiest thing to go back to for McCarthy, generally speaking, because it is very thought-provoking as a whole, especially for the first hour of it. And since on Audible, the it's on the Audible Plus catalog, and it's only an hour and 40 minutes at one speed. I listen to it at 1.2 speed, which means it's like an hour and a half. Pretty easy to actually read and get through pretty quickly, so it's not a huge time commitment, and it is, like I said, pretty thought-provoking. Next up, I did a reread of The Road, which of course is sort of the infamous thing on my channel. I think out of all the dislikes that I have on booktube stuff, I think like 2/3 or more of those dislikes are either on The Road's video or on videos where I discuss Cormac McCarthy in one way, shape, or form, whether that even the books that I really like from McCarthy. I think people saw what I thought of The Road and just thought that I don't like McCarthy, and so just straight up dislike on everything else. But regardless of what the reasons for that are, I didn't like The Road when I first read it, and I didn't like it a whole lot more on this reread, but I'm glad that I did give it a reread, doing an audio immersive experience as opposed to just the eyeball read, because it allowed me to not focus on the things that I disliked with the eyeball read. There were still some problems I had with it, whereas, let's just put it this way, the first time that I read this, I rated it 2 stars on Goodreads, but like barely 2 stars. I was going to give it 1, but then decided no, there were some moments that were good enough that giving this 1 is kind of unjustified. I'll give it 2. This time around, it stayed 2 stars, but barely not 3. Instead of being barely 2, it's barely not 3. And I think a lot of that, if I gave it another reread or something like that, or with a little bit more time, I actually don't think of this as negatively as I think of, say, Blood Meridian, because Blood Meridian did nothing for me, whereas this one, even the things that didn't work for me the first time around were pretty close to working a little bit better on audio. So I still don't really like it a lot, but I don't hate it as much this time around, which I'm grateful for. Like I said, I could go back and rate this up at 3 stars if I wanted to. So that kind of says something about that, but I did actually finish off the McCarthy journey with No Country for Old Men, a reread of this. Now, of course, when I read The Road and basically decided I wasn't going to continue on with McCarthy back last October or something like that, I did have a friend who read No Country for Old Men in December, doing an audio immersive experience with it, and said, hey, I think if you did this with the audiobook, you might actually enjoy No Country for Old Men. And I was like, okay, I'll trust you for it, because I actually already owned it, and everything by McCarthy except, well, all of McCarthy's 12 novels besides The Passenger and Stella Maris are on the audio or on the Audible Plus catalog, so it's actually really easy to go through and listen to those. I decided to give it a shot. No Country for Old Men last December became one of my top 10 books of 2023. I enjoyed it quite a bit. I enjoyed it even more on this reread, knowing where certain things were going. I was able to pay attention to certain threads and plot lines a little bit better. That made things hit just as hard. I didn't have quite as much of a gut punch as I did the first time, because I knew the main thing that was going to happen, the main reveal. But everything else was just still so good. I actually went back and re-rated this 5 stars, whereas back in December I rated it only 4 stars because I was being a stubborn little piece of garbage like I am. But I did go back and actually rate this 5 stars again, so I have 3 out of the 12 McCarthy books are 5 stars for me. This is my 3rd favorite one now, just behind The Passenger and Stella Maris. I really loved No Country for Old Men still, and I think the audio is fantastic, and most notably, Anton Chigurh is actually one of the most compelling villains I have personally read, as opposed to Judge Holden. But with all of that said, like, that is a ton of reading that I got done in July. Like I mentioned in the beginning, this was due in no small part to audiobooks. That's because of all the McCarthy that I got done was largely audio based. So I did The Passenger and Stella Maris, kind of an audio immersive thing. Sutri and Blood Meridian were mostly audiobook, but I did a little bit of immersive with those. But then The Sunset Limited, The Road, and No Country for Old Men, I did basically all audio as well. That meant that I was able to get through a lot. But that's actually not all that I got read in July. I did also read a little secret project, kind of novella thing by Christopher Rocchio that he sent me. That's probably going to be released in something at some point in time, but I don't know any of the details on that, and I can't actually talk anything more about it besides what I just said. But it is very good, so I hope that you guys are able to get your hands on it eventually. Otherwise, the other thing that I read was Tales of the Sun Eater Volume 4 by Christopher Rocchio, which I did copy edit. That'll be out either late this year or early next year, depending on what happens. It's basically ready to go. I think Christopher just got the completed cover art for it, so basically just designing that. is all that it needs done and released, but because it contains a story from the Empire of Silence Diamond Edition and the Andorida Murdered Son, the Murdered Son from Andorida Books, that edition, because it contains those, it's not going to release at least until after those two have released and gotten into people's hands. So it might be a little while before that's out, but I did copy edit that, which meant that I read it, and I enjoyed that as well. Speaking on all of that reading, which was an absurd amount of reading, this is the most reading that I've personally gotten done in a single month ever. Due in no small part to audiobooks, sure, but man, it was a lot, and almost all of it was really great. But I do have to give my book of the month to the first couple things that I really gushed about here. The Passenger and Stella Maris as a duology, as one complete package with these. There's just nothing that I can really say to express how much I really, really liked these books that I'm not going to have said in those reviews that I'm writing. Those reviews will be quite lengthy. Can't wait to release those. I'm basically just going to record a video and audio of me reading those reviews and make those the review for this on the channel, because I don't know if there's any other way I could review these books and actually say what I want to say about them. They're just so good. But that is the end of talking about July. Let's talk about what I want to read in August. Thankfully, this video is not going to go on forever. I don't have that much planned for August. Things could go any sort of direction in my personal life that could affect how things go, but I don't really have that much planned. Over the first couple weeks, though, I do want to finish a couple of books that have been outstanding. The first one of those, of course, just kind of being The Failures, because that's the one that I started in July. I'm really sad that I wasn't able to finish this in July, but because of all the other stuff I had going on, I kind of had to have this one on the back burner for quite a while. Like I said, kind of unfortunately, but I do hope to get through the back half of this over the first half of the month and finish that up, because I've been really enjoying it. And I also plan to finish Infinite Jest, which should be in the first couple weeks as well. Over these first couple of weekends of the month, I should be able to finish chapter 28 and also reread a couple of the early chapters in the book, get the last diary out for this book, and then be done with it. And that'll account for basically a 4-month journey reading Infinite Jest. A lot shorter of a time than I was planning out and that I was anticipating both. But I've been really enjoying it. Chapter 8 has started off pretty well. I have already started that as of this morning. I'm about a quarter of the way through chapter 28, so I'm right on schedule. In fact, a little bit ahead of schedule to be able to get it done on the time that I need to. And it's still going good. I'm hoping that it ends off with a bang, with the proper bang that I want it to. And that's all I have to say on that for now. Otherwise, my reading is going to be pretty light and easy for the rest of the month. Let's talk about Night Shift by Stephen King, finally getting back to a little bit more Stephen King. I reread Rage and The Long Walk a little bit earlier this year. I originally planned to do Night Shift in between those two, but decided since those two were both rereads from the same volume, I would just kind of do them together because it'd be a little bit easier. Night Shift is pretty short, only about 350 pages, and it's like 20 short stories, which means it should be pretty easy to read over the course of the month in little bits and pieces in between other stuff as I see fit and as I need, like rendering videos, for example. If I'm able to get through a lot of video editing for the second channel, I plan to read some stories of this here and there so that I can kind of work through it and actually get back into reading Stephen King a little bit more fully. That's what I plan to do with that. The next thing that I plan to read, main focus for the month that isn't Night Shift and finishing these two books, is just going to be checking out all of Uzumaki by Junji Ito, which I always say that name weird because my accent makes me want to say Ito instead of Ito. You gotta love having a slight Western accent, and I'm excited for Uzumaki. I think it's going to be a good starting point for horror related manga, but I don't really know what else to expect or say about it because I think it speaks for itself for anybody who's read it. It's quite memorable to everybody. I'm really excited to give it a shot. I don't know how long it'll take, but manga is pretty quick to read, so I think that having this kind of there for the last couple weeks of the month to get a review out in September is more or less the plan with that. Otherwise, my main plan is to read my only audiobook that I have planned for the month, and we'll see if I even decide to do this with how much audio I spent doing in July. The Rising Storm by Cavan Scott. I don't know how to pronounce the name, but it's the second book in the main High Republic adult series. from Star Wars. So I did the first one of these in June with a couple friends, and I plan to do the second one over the course of August. That's basically all I have planned audio-wise. And then I have, if I have time, of course, I still kind of have Valor by John Quinn on the back burner. This isn't very much reading planned for August. Maybe I'll get to some of this stuff. Maybe I won't. Maybe I'll start Valor and actually start it because I kind of want to. Maybe I'll start Lord of Chaos ahead of time. I don't think I'm actually going to start this until September, but there's the chance that I'll actually move back on into more Wheel of Time this month. Definitely smaller plans for August as I prepare and catch up on other video stuff and have some other family stuff going on in the background. Plus, I have all of McCarthy done, so that's actually a big weight off my chest that makes August feel quite empty on the reading front because I don't have more McCarthy to get through, so that's a big thing. But I'm going to go ahead and stop the video here. I've been talking for like an hour and a half today for recording. My throat hurts. I'm ready to go, so I'm just going to end the video here. I think this video was a lot longer than these videos normally tend to be because of the July wrap-up. So if you have any thoughts on what I read over the course of July or what I plan to read in August, please drop them in the comments below if you would be so kind. Otherwise, I'll be back this Thursday with some sort of video. I don't actually know off the top of my head what it is. My video notes are telling me that it's going to be top 5 dystopian stories that I want to read, so that's actually a pretty short video for Thursday compared to this very long video for Tuesday. But thank you for watching. Whether you plan to check out that video or not, I'll be back in the next video, hopefully with a more recovered voice, because wow, my throat actually hurts really bad right now.